Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me, and we're starting. Thank you, sir, for agreeing to do this interview, the young reporter began kissing my ass. Since you are resigning from the post of CEO of one of the largest employers in the region, our newspaper wants to tell about you in an article in the Sunday edition. I understand that. I'm just afraid that your readers won't have anything to be interested in, I replied. We are successful because we produce an excellent product at a competitive price. I really don't think it's a corporate secret. Most successful companies follow this formula. What I was looking for was human interest, sir, the guy replied. I want to know things like how long it took you to rise to the top of the company. Have you ever been discouraged? How long have you been working at Norris Enterprises? Did you start from the bottom and move up the career ladder? Was there a turning point in your career that you can point to as the day you realized you were going to become the leader of the company, or did it happen gradually? The visionary guy asked the question. You're serious, aren't you? I think you're too young to remember the business climate in 2009. It was a very difficult period, as you may have read in some history books. Perhaps you think that dinosaurs walked the planet 10 years ago, I mused. You will learn that time tends to slip away. In fact, I clearly remember the day when I realized that I was destined to succeed in this company, as if it were yesterday and not 10 years ago. The story will not be what you expect, so just sit back and I will try to reconstruct the events as I remember them. You have a few minutes, don't you? I asked, leaning back in my chair and thinking about that spring day that was so long ago. I was woken up by the ringing of my mobile phone. By the time I found the place where I had dropped my trousers on the floor the night before, the call had already stopped. A quick glance at my cell phone showed that I had missed 7 calls. I fell asleep after Jay Leno's monologue, the host of the evening show, A Proctet Trans. The clock on the bedside table showed that it was only a few minutes after 6 in the morning. Something must have happened to get so many calls between midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning. The last call was from my boss's home phone. I dialed the number and waited for an answer. Hello, Frank, Marge Larson replied excitedly. I'm glad you called back. Hell awaits you here. You'd better get home as soon as possible. My husband, your wife, and your wife's brother-in-law are in the hospital. They'll get better, so don't worry too much about them, but you need to come back here and help me clean up all the shit that flew through the proverbial fan. What the hell are you talking about, Marge? I demanded an answer. Why are there so many people in the hospital? Was it an accident or an explosion? What happened? I wish the reason was so mundane, Frank. I have to go to the hospital, then visit my lawyer, and finally get to the factory and find out what the hell is going on. It's a pity that I haven't been paying more attention to business lately. Roberta knows the situation well enough, Marge. Let her do the business while you focus on more pressing matters, I suggested as my mind tried to sort out the information Marge had revealed to me. Oh yes, Roberta. I forgot to mention that she's in jail. I have to go, Frank. Try to get your ass back as soon as possible. I need you here, Marge urged me, ending the conversation. I drove out of the motel and headed north on Route 81. While I was driving, I tried to make some phone calls to find out what was going on at home. My wife and sister-in-law did not answer the phone. My wife's parents didn't tell me anything except that my wife and their other son-in-law are in the hospital. Both of my children lived in Washington and knew no more than I did, if at all. I returned to my hometown almost 3 hours later, having no further information about the situation. I entered the hospital at 9 in the morning and immediately went to the counter. I soon found out that my wife had suffered a broken nose and a concussion. She was under surveillance now, whatever that meant. She smiled faintly as I was ushered into her room. Frank, this is all a huge mistake, dear. You have to believe me, she began. Well, that's really good news, Tessa, I replied sarcastically. I think the rainbow circles on your face and the fact that you were unconscious for half an hour or so just fooled the medical staff. They mistakenly thought that something had happened to you. If this is a mistake, we will be able to receive a large compensation for negligence. Let's go home. No, Frank, it wasn't a mistake. I have a concussion and a broken nose. I'll have to have surgery when the swelling goes down. The mistake was what happened to Jeff, she said, and then slowly added, and Jack. That explains it so well, Tessa, I admitted. You're fucked up because of a mistake, as you put it, involving my boss and your sister's husband. Can you anticipate all the questions that I might have, answer them, and prevent us from doing this in an overly complicated way? I can guess some things that you might be wondering about, Frank, but I'm still recovering from a concussion and I don't think it would be a good idea to talk too much right now. I'll feel better soon and then we can talk about it, okay? I see that all this time working at the law firm is paying off, Tessa, I snapped. You just get some rest. And while you're resting, maybe you can come up with some story that will explain everything to my satisfaction. And perhaps show that you are a helpless victim of some kind of conspiracy. I was too angry to stay in the same room with my wife. I have already found out that she, my boss, and her sister's husband were taken away from my house by ambulance the previous evening. Add to this the fact that my immediate supervisor at work, Roberta, was arrested and taken to prison at the same time, and also from my house, and this caused me a feeling of anxiety that I could not get rid of. Am I being paranoid to worry about such trifles? And then she tells me that she's too weak to tell me what the hell happened last night in my house? As I was leaving the hospital and entering the lobby, I was stopped by a man in a suit. He handed me some kind of ID with a bunch of small print that I couldn't read without my glasses. Even though I'm a little farsighted, I could easily tell that this guy was some kind of policeman. Everything was getting more interesting by the minute. Mr. Barker? He began the interrogation. Can I ask you a few questions? You have a little time, don't you? You can't take your wife home for a few more hours, can you? By almost any definition, you've just done it already, I replied irritably. Is that all, or is there something else? He stared at me for a few seconds, considering my abrupt response. Finally, he shrugged and continued. I'm trying to piece together what happened at your house last night. There are several versions of events, but they all point to you being the central force in this perfect storm. Where were you last night? I was in Harrisburg. I met with a client and then had dinner with him. I stayed at the 8 Motel near Hershey and checked out this morning just after 6 in the morning. I was sent there on the orders of my boss, Jack Larson, through my immediate superior, Roberta Peters. Since they were two of those cluster bastards you've already interrogated, you should have known that if, of course, they were in a truthful mood. I added sarcastically. They both told me that you were sent to Harrisburg, the detective confessed. It's a little more complicated. Miss Peters said that you called from Harrisburg and asked for a package to be delivered to your home last night. Her complicity was a direct result of her responding to your request. This is complete nonsense, I said flatly. I didn't call her, I didn't talk to her, and I didn't know that she came to my house for any reason. I called my boss at home last night and talked to Mrs. Larson. I asked to speak to her husband, but she told me he was out of town. He went fishing in upstate New York and will be back late the next evening. Mrs. Larson asked me if it was important. Since her family actually owns the business, I didn't find it possible to keep her in the dark about anything, so I explained my dilemma. I bought an expensive pearl necklace for my wife's birthday and foolishly left it in my office desk. I was worried that I had left it there and that my wife would not receive it for her birthday, which was today. I told Marge that I was going to ask Jack, my boss, if he could bring a gift to my house. My wife was going to leave to visit her elderly grandmother at a nursing home in New Jersey. She was going to stay at a motel nearby and come home this morning. I was hoping that the necklace would be in the house and I could call her and ask her to try it on. Then she will praise me for being a very caring and loving husband, even if I have to leave on business on her birthday, I reasoned. Miss Peters practically told me the same story, only she claims that you knew that Mrs. Larson would call her and ask her to complete this task, since her husband was fishing out of state. She claims that you set her up, the detective finished. Framed her for what? I demanded an answer. I called my boss to ask him to do me a personal favor. I had no idea that Roberta would be involved in this. I still have no idea what the hell happened. Why are you asking me these questions? Why is she arrested? What the hell happened in my house last night? Did you ask Jeff Rogers to come to your house to let Miss Peters in? The flatfoot cop continued, proving that he had the temperament and brains of a bulldog. Where the hell are you getting this shit from? I asked in disbelief. I called my wife's sister, June, and told her that my boss could call her. That was before I talked to his wife and found out he was out of town. I asked her if she could come to our place with a spare key to our house, which she keeps, meet my boss there and let him in. It was a pretty simple request. It looks like it, said this damn idiot, a detective who looks more like Charlie Chan's son, a fictional police detective created by writer Earl Durr Biggers for a series of detective novels, Approx Trans. Number 2, then a modern policeman. Can you tell me what's going on? How did my wife or any of these cluster bastards end up in the hospital? Why was Roberta arrested? Who was kicked out of American Idol, American TV series singing competition, Approx Trans, this week? I demanded. All I can tell you at the moment is that Lil Rounds, a participant in the show American Idol, Approx Trans, is fried, admitted the departing lawyer, heading for a fresh box of donuts, just delivered by a patrolman. You bastard! I growled at the detective's back. I thought she was going to win this whole case. I couldn't think of anything else to do, so I went home. I was terribly angry with my wife for using her evasive lawyer language when I asked her what had happened. I didn't really care about Jeff, my ex-brother-in-law, and my dorky boss, Jack. The first one has been a pain in my ass ever since my sister-in-law dragged his pathetic ass home from college about 15 years ago. He was the second quarterback on the Penn State team that narrowly lost in the Orange Bowl. Somehow, this elevated him to hero status at the orphanage that my wife called her family home. The fact that he never graduated from university and could not find a permanent job was unimportant. He was the fucking Lion of Nittany, Nittany Lions, sports teams of the University of Pennsylvania, Approx Trans. My boss was another jerk. I have repeatedly demonstrated my knowledge of the business and my value to the company. Without bragging, I knew more about Norris Enterprises than he and Roberta put together. The only downside to my work record was that I was a man, so Jack, my asshole boss, promoted Roberta to me. It was based on her single quality. She made love like a mink. I suppose it was a positive action because she never said no to him. Now Roberta was in jail and the other suspects were in the hospital. I haven't been able to figure out the cause except that Tessa had a concussion and a broken nose. The extent or causes of the other two's injuries were somehow a secret. I didn't even know why Roberta was arrested. The idea that they were somehow blaming me for this was just ridiculous. The house looked like a bomb had exploded in it. The front door was broken down and boarded up with some crooked nails. I went to the kitchen door and went inside. The first thing I noticed was a trail of blood coming down the stairs. After walking through it, I found even more blood on my leather couch. It resembled liver in consistency and was a very bright crimson color. I decided, well, fuck him, and went up the stairs trying not to step on the bloody trail. It became almost impossible when I entered my bedroom. There was blood everywhere. It covered the floor and the bed and was randomly sprayed on the walls and furniture. And then I saw a wrapped box with a pearl necklace in the corner of the room by the closet. I quickly took it and opened it. I have determined that the necklace is intact and undamaged. He put it in his pocket. I studied the scene of the massacre, but I couldn't figure it out, either in my head or in the tales of this mess. I realized that I should have watched more programs about criminologists and less reality shows. I left the house as I found it and headed to the office. Tessa was involved in the appearance of the blood, so she could remove it or arrange for it. I had a bad feeling about the whole situation. There was less blood in the Damn OK Corral, the site of the most famous shootout in the history of the American Old West, Approx Trans, than in my bedroom. Such things rarely happened when I was sitting in bed reading a novel. Marge was in the office when I arrived. It was obvious that the state of anxiety was elevated. I think when your superiors are hospitalized or imprisoned, that's it. Creates a certain tension. Frank! Marge Larson called from her husband's office, inviting me to join her. I'm glad you came back so quickly. Have you been to the hospital? Actually, yes, Marge, I admitted, entering the room and closing the door. My wife bullied me for a couple of minutes and then I was interrogated by some genius from the police department. Did you tell him anything? Marge asked. Now I really felt out of place. What kind of question was that? What the hell could I tell you? Yes, Marge. I told him where to find Jimmy Hoffa, a missing trade unionist, most likely killed by the mafia. Elvis, Presley, there were suspicions that he was not dead, and Bigfoot. I didn't want to, but the guy turned out to be so smart and got it all out of me. What the hell can I tell him if I have no idea what the hell is going on? I protested vehemently. How did you explain that your brother-in-law was at your house? You told me that your wife's sister would be there to let me in. I gave this information to Roberta. How did you get Jeff to come to your house instead of June? It was a stroke of genius, she laughed. Have you ever participated in a conversation when you had no idea what was going on? Do you understand every word that is used, but altogether they don't seem to make any sense? Then you wonder if you have brain damage or have fallen into a stupor. I felt exactly the same way. What the hell are you talking about, Marge? I asked into the void. Marge stared at me for a few seconds. and then suddenly seemed to make a brilliant observation. "My God, Frank, you didn't know anything, did you?" Marge asked rhetorically, puzzled. "You really wanted Tessa to get this present for her birthday. You didn't know about Jeff and had no idea that he was the one who let Roberta into your house. It's priceless. I seem to be in the dark, Marge, but I expect you to fill me in and damn fast. These stupid references to something and incomprehensible statements just piss me off. Tell me what's going on. I don't have much time. I told the hospital that I would be back at 1 o'clock to pick up Tessa and bring her home. Just tell me everything and tell me in pure English so that I understand. Let me start by saying that you really don't want to take Tessa home. She has a broken nose and a concussion because Jeff punched her in the face," Marge said. "Don't turn this into a game, Marge," I warned. "You can guess that I want to know why he hit her and why I shouldn't take her away. Jeff hit her in a fit of jealousy when he saw her riding my husband in a cowboy style. It was more than he could take, so he hit her hard and then started hitting Jack. He did a hell of a job on Jack, not to mention breaking his jaw and knocking out most of his teeth. Was Tessa riding Jack? Jeff got mad and attacked Jack for me? We've never been this close, but I had to thank him for that." "Wow, it's too much to swallow at once, Marge. Were Jack and Tessa playing hide the sausage? Did Jeff catch them and beat Jack up for me? I owe this jerk a lot. I'm ashamed of all the times I made fun of him," I confessed. "No, Frank, it's not like that," Marge exclaimed. "Jeff beat Jack up because he got jealous. He used your wife for years and flew into a rage when he found out she was unfaithful to him." I staggered and sank into a chair. Jeff and Jack both used Tessa? How could I miss this? It was obvious that if Marge was right, then I wouldn't rush to get Tessa out of the hospital. And why was Jeff himself hospitalized? Let me see if I've got this right, Marge. Jeff came to my house to tell Roberta about my gift for Tessa. He and Roberta assumed that Tessa and Jack had left town and the house would be empty. They somehow caught Tessa riding Jack. Jeff bullied Tessa because he considered her his exclusive cheater. Then he worked Jack off for using his fool. Is everything accurate now? I asked. I think you've got it right now, Frank, Marge agreed. One small problem. Lady Boss number 1 forgot that Jeff is also in the hospital. You think Jeff beat himself unconscious even though it didn't take much, I added in my best Charlie Chan imitation, which wasn't very good. Marge actually chuckled as she answered, Roberta shot Jeff in the femoral artery. He was bleeding like a hunted pig. The police arrived just as she shot at him and eventually broke down your front door. By that time, Jeff was already dragging his ass down the stairs and was covered in blood, shitting on your leather sofa. I see, I replied, unable to think of anything more witty. Are you going to tell me that Tessa was playing with Roberta too? It's so wrong. No, not Tessa, Marge explained. Roberta and Jack have been bumping bellies for about a year now. When she saw Jeff giving her boss and lover such a thorough kick in the ass, she took a gun out of her coat pocket and shot Jeff. She was arrested for numerous violations of the rules of handling firearms, as well as for shooting this asshole. It seems to me, Marge, that you are very well informed about this whole fiasco. Were you under the bed or maybe even sucking Jeff off at the same time? Nothing will surprise me now. I don't think so, Marge chuckled. I've had a frequent detective following Jack over the past few weeks. He was outside your house listening through a device he hid in Jack's pants. He was the one who called the cops when he heard Jeff was going crazy. If you had someone following Jack, you should have known that he was already at my house and using Tessa when you sent Roberta there to deliver the necklace. Has it occurred to you that there might be problems? Damn, Roberta never hid the fact that she had a gun. Everyone knew about it. I practically yelled at Marge. Actually, Frank, it occurred to me that this Annie Oakley, the American sniper who starred in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, Approx Trans, might pull out her old pig's leg and do border justice, smiled Marge. I just didn't expect your brother-in-law to be there either. I didn't know he was using Tessa, too. I thought June would let Roberta in and be a reliable witness to everything that was going on. Damn it, Marge. Tessa and Jack could have been shot by Roberta, I said excitedly. Have you ever thought about it? Well, of course. I knew it was possible. I thought you knew everything and were trying to frame me to catch Jack and Tessa. I just framed Roberta to protect the innocent, as they say. The fact that Jeff, who let Roberta in, was also Tessa's lover and went on to beat the shit out of both of them was just spicy gravy. I thought you planned this too somehow. Well, now Jack and Roberta are out of business and you need to run the company. Marge, have you thought about this, Or were you so eager for revenge that you were ready to destroy the company that your father created from scratch? I demanded an answer. I repeat, Frank, I've been thinking. We both know that you've forgotten more than these two idiots ever knew about running this company. I thought you might like Jack's position in his office, with double the salary. I almost ruined everything when I stupidly asked, do you mean Roberta or Tessa?